Hey folks, in this video we're going to practice building CSS layouts by building this simple responsive navbar, first with only CSS Grid and then with only flexbox. The purpose of this is to help you practice and also to see how Grid and flexbox approaches are both similar and different. To try to build this yourself first, you can get the files for this practice from the CSS Layout GitHub repository that I have linked down below. Once you have the repository on your own computer, you're going to want to go down to the Practice 1 folder. In here, we have a README first markdown file, which has details and also functional requirements for what we're building. The mockups folder contains images of what the finished solution should look like on different devices. Then the problem folder has the starter HTML and CSS files for you to work on. And if you get stumped, you can go to the solution folder and find the finished solution files. Now in the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through how I would build this practice problem step by step, and you can compare it with your own work. All right, let's get started. All right, so I have VS Code open here, and in VS Code, I've opened the Practice 1 folder that's in that CSS layout repository. So to start off, let's take a look at this README first markdown file. So this is some details about the project itself. Let's take a look at the functional requirements and see what we need to build. So for mobile viewport widths, which is up to 800 pixels, the nav links should be displayed in one row, horizontally aligned, so space is evenly divided between and around the links. And on very narrow mobile widths, we want to have 10 pixels of space between the links. So that's the mobile requirements. And let's take a look at the mockups for the mobile site as well. So here's mobile, and let me zoom in a bit. So you can see here we have the links, and we have space evenly divided between them. Then if we open this other one, this is narrow mobile. So on mobile widths that are a lot more narrow, we have that 10 pixels of space between the links. So those are the mobile requirements. Let's also take a look at what we need to build for tablet and desktop. So it says here on tablet desktop viewport widths greater than or equal to 800 pixels, the first home link should be horizontally all the way to the left, and the other three links are all the way to the right side with 20 pixels of space between them. So any extra space is going to go between the first home link and the second about link. Let's see what this looks like. So here's what the desktop version should look like. We have the 20 pixels of space between the last three links, which are all the way to the right. And then we have the home link, the first link, all the way to the left. And then any extra space goes between home and about. Okay, so that's the mockups. Now let's check out our starter files. So this is going to be in the problem subfolder here. And we're doing grid first, so I'm going to open grid HTML. And grid HTML is loading grid.css for its styles. There we go. Okay, so going into our HTML file, let's take a look at the markup that we're starting with. So in our HTML, we have the body tag, and then in the body tag, it's containing the header tag, nav tag, and then the links are in an unordered list UL tag. Now, I'm using these different tags because these are semantic HTML tags, and I always try to use them when I can for accessibility. So the header means it's the head of the website, and then the nav tag means that these links are part of navigation in the website. Then I'm using an unordered list for our links because these are literally a list of links. So why not put them in a list tag? And we have our 4 navigation links: home, about, products, and contact. All right, so now I want to run this website locally. And to do that, I'm using the VS Code extension live server. And I want to open the grid.html file in that extension. So I can right click it here in the Explorer and select Open with Live Server. All right, so now I have VS Code open here on the left, and I have the website on the right. So let's take a look at our grid.css file to see where we're starting in terms of styles. And I do have a bunch of global styles for adding box sizing border box, resetting margin and padding, and then adding some general font and color and some spacing styles. So the main thing we're going to be writing styles in is in the top nav element here, which is that unordered list tag. So here, starting out, I've added a max width of 62.5 rems or 1000 pixels, and then I'm centering it on the page with margin inline auto. This is so the website content will be centered on really large desktop screen sizes. And then I'm removing the default bullet points. All right, then I've also added some more text styles for the nav links, basically to make them bigger on larger viewport widths. So on our website, we really just need to focus on the actual layout styles. So the first thing for mobile was that we wanted to put all the links on one row with space evenly divided between and around the links. So we'll start by putting them all in one row with grid. So we want to use grid, and we do want to just double check and make sure we're going to be setting the styles on the correct element. So if we look again at our HTML, the links are all list item elements, and they're direct children of the UL tag. So we want the UL tag with a class of top nav to be that grid container or grid parent. So in our styles for the top nav class, we're going to say display grid to make this a grid parent. And we also want to put the grid children into columns. So I'm going to add grid template columns, and we have 4 links. So I'm going to set this to repeat 4, auto. This is going to size each column according to how much text content they have. So this will make the space between the text links more even. So there we go. Now we have all the links in one row. And by default, justify content on a grid is set to stretch, so that the elements are going to stretch horizontally to fill the available space. And then justify items is going to default to start. So if I inspect this, you can see this more clearly. So each grid child item is aligned to the left or the start side inside their cell. Now, since we're starting with mobile styles, I'm going to turn on responsive design mode in Firefox, which enables us to emulate different devices. And I have the iPhone 14 set, which has a viewport width of 393. So in our inspection tools, if I go up in the source code to the UL tag, I'm going to click that grid label or chip, I guess you could say, and this is going to turn on highlighting. And if we want to see it better, we can change the settings. If we go to layout in our grid panel here, and this is kind of a Firefox bug, it always resets to purple highlighting, but you just want to toggle that checkbox and it'll now have the yellow color. So let's zoom in a bit so you can see better too. So here is our grid. So let's go back to our functional requirements. And it says that for mobile, the space should be evenly divided between and around the links. So right now we have all the space kind of at the end of each link, and then everything's stretching to fit the available space. So instead of that, I'm going to go back down to our styles for the top nav, and I'm going to set justify content space evenly. This is going to put all the extra space between and around the links. So let's save that. And let's inspect again and just kind of toggle those styles. So you can see that the space is divided between the links and it's basically the same. And then it's not shaded after the last contact link, but it exists there. So you can see that if I uncheck the highlighting, it does look like everything is spaced evenly. Okay, and then we also want to take care of the very narrow widths, like 320 pixels, if you have like older iPhones. So right now you can see that when it gets narrower, the space between the links is getting narrower all the way until they're actually flush, which you don't want because that makes it not very readable. So we want to add, let's go back to 320, and we want to add a gap space of 10 pixels. So now when we save, there's more space between the links. And even if we get really narrow, we're still going to have that space, even though it does eventually overflow, but This is less than 300 pixels viewport width, which I don't think we really need to worry about. Okay, so we have our mobile site. Let's kind of go back to what we had. Let's turn off the highlighting, and I want to compare our website with the mockups. So I'm going to go back to the mobile mockup here. Let's try to, that's about the same size, maybe a tiny bit smaller. So just kind of eyeballing things here. It does look pretty much the same. And I'm also going to check out the very narrow mobile width. And that looks pretty good too. All right, so we are good on mobile. Next, let's do the desktop styles. So in Firefox, I'm going to change to a 1200 pixel viewport. And let's zoom out so we can see everything better. And in the README, for tablet and desktop styles at 800 pixel viewport width and greater, we want the home link to be all the way at the left, the other links all the way to the right, and all the space between home and about. So in our styles, the first thing we want to do is we want to add a media query to target 800 pixels or 50 rems. So this is going to be in the grid container, and I'm going to add media width greater than or equal to 50 rems. And here I'm going to change our grid template columns. So I'm going to say grid template columns. And instead of the 4 columns of auto width, I'm going to make the first column containing the home link. We want that to take up as much space as possible, no matter what viewport width we have. So I'm going to set that first column to 1 FR. Then I'll set the other 3 to be auto width. So repeat 3, auto. And for desktop, we also want to increase that gap to 20 pixels. Okay, so let's save. So now you can see that we do indeed have the home all the way on the left. And if it's not working. And if I inspect this first home link, you can see that the entire cell is with the home and it is aligned to the left. So that's where that space is coming from. Okay, so let's also, I'm just going to turn off the highlighting. Let's look at our mockup. So here's a desktop mockup, and it actually looks pretty good. You know, we have all of the space between home and about, and then we have 20 pixels of space between the other 3 links. All right, so let's do one more check just to sort of see how everything looks on all viewport widths. So we have our desktop here, and if we decrease, once we hit below 800, which is right here, then we go to our mobile styles where the links are evenly spaced. Then when we keep decreasing, the space between them decreases, and then finally it minimizes at 10 pixels of width. All right, so this looks pretty good for our grid solution. So next, let's build that same navbar except with flexbox this time. Now the flexbox starter files are flex.html and flex.css. All the functional requirements are the same, and I'm going to right click and open flex.html with live server. So let's also load mobile view first. So we have it open in the iPhone, and everything is the same as we had in our grid styles starter files. So just like in grid, with Flexbox, you want to determine which element is going to be the flex container. And again, we're going to use the top nav for that because it contains the 4 links in list item tags. And as you can see on the website, I did make the header a different color in the Flexbox styles just to differentiate it a little bit from the grid files. So let's start with our mobile styles where we have the space equally divided among the links. So I'm going to make the top nav a flex container by adding display flex. And now you can see all the flex child items are in one row. And we want to add a gap of 10 pixels so they're not crunched up like that. Then we want to, similarly, as we did with grid, we want to make the space even between them. So justify content, space evenly. And now we have it like that. And that looks pretty good for the mobile styles. It behaves basically the same as the grid styles. And I think it was with maybe a few fewer styles to write. So that's kind of nice. So next, let's create the tablet and desktop styles where home is all the way on the left and all the links are on the right. So I'm going to go to the 1200 pixel version and zoom out so we can see the entire website. And again, I'm going to add a media query. So media width greater than or equal to 50 rems. And here we want to put all the extra space again after the home. And you can do this with a actually pretty nice trick with flexbox to push the 3 links to the right. So in our media query, I'm going to target the first LI, first child. And here I'm going to set margin, you want to set margin right because it's the one to the right of the home, or margin inline end. It's the same thing. They both work. I just try to use directional properties when I can. And we're going to set this to auto. So now when we save, the home link has now pushed all the other items all the way to the right, because when you set a margin to auto, it's going to try to be as large as possible based on the available space. So that's why, it's pushing all the links to the right, because there is that available space. So it's taking up all of it with the margin. And we also want to increase the gap on desktop to 20 pixels. There we go. So that is our navbar for Flexbox. And again, as the viewport width decreases, you can see we switch at 800 pixels. The links get closer together. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. And we get down to mobile. And again, we have that minimum of 10 pixels of gap space between the links on really small mobile devices. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now let's do a little quick comparison with the grid versus the Flexbox version of this. So I actually just want to show you the styles here. So here's the Flexbox styles. And let's also open the grid styles. So you can see here, we have top nav open on each of them. On the Flexbox styles, this is how many styles we had to write for everything. And then this is what we had to write with grid. So it's honestly a pretty similar amount of lines. You can use either to build this navbar. I think they both do pretty much the same thing. Personally, I would probably just use Flexbox for this. That might just be because I learned Flexbox first, so I tend to go for Flexbox when either works the same. But you can use whichever one you want. So that's how you can build a simple navbar using grid and Flexbox. Let me know down in the comments if you found this video helpful, as well as what you thought of it. And if you could, give the video a thumbs up just to help out with the YouTube algorithm. I would really appreciate that. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.